I stared at his hands as they guided the clay, strong fingers working the wet earth with such precision that I could barely focus on my own piece. The workshop was nearly empty now, just the two of us and the soft hum of the pottery wheel. When he looked up and caught me watching, something shifted in the air between us. His eyes held mine for a moment too long, and I felt heat rise in my chest that had nothing to do with the kiln nearby. "Want me to show you a different technique?" he asked, his voice low and rough. I nodded, not trusting my voice, as he moved behind me, his chest nearly brushing my back as his hands covered mine on the clay. "I'm Freya, and I thought I was just taking a ceramics class to unwind after work. I never expected to meet Kai, or to feel this pull toward him that made my hands shake every time he demonstrated a new method. But here we were, alone in the workshop after everyone else had gone home, and the tension between us was so thick I could barely breathe. Понравилось начало? Ставьте лайк, подписывайтесь, пишите в комментариях, что вас зацепило. The clay needs to be centered first, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear as his hands guided mine. Feel how it moves. His palms were rough from years of working with his hands, and when they pressed over mine, I could feel the calluses that spoke of real craft, real skill. The clay spun between our fingers, malleable and warm, and I found myself leaning back slightly into his solid presence. "Like this?" I whispered, though I was barely paying attention to the pottery anymore. His closeness was intoxicating, the scent of him mixing clay dust and something distinctly masculine that made my pulse quicken. "Exactly like that," he said, and I felt, rather than saw his smile. "You're a natural." We'd been partners in this evening class for 3 weeks now, paired up on the first night when I'd arrived late and flustered from a difficult day at the gallery where I worked. Kai had simply looked up from his wheel and gestured to the empty seat beside him, no judgment, just quiet acceptance. He was different from the men I usually found myself drawn to, less polished, more grounded, with hands that created beautiful things instead of just pushing papers around boardrooms. "Play me something," he said now, his voice still close to my ear as we worked the clay together. "What made you want to learn pottery?" I thought about giving him the easy answer, stress relief, trying something new, filling empty evenings. Instead, I found myself being honest. I wanted to make something real, something I could touch and hold. My whole world is so digital, theoretical. I wanted to work with my hands. His fingers tightened slightly over mine, and I felt the clay respond to the pressure. "I understand that," he said. "There's something honest about clay. It doesn't lie to you." "What about you?" I asked, tilting my head slightly so I could catch his profile in my peripheral vision. "How long have you been doing this?" "About 5 years," he said. "Started after my divorce, actually. Needed something that was just mine, you know? Something she couldn't take with her." The vulnerability in his admission surprised me. Over the past weeks, our conversations had been pleasant but surface level. Compliments on each other's work, observations about technique, the usual small talk that fills shared spaces. This felt different, more intimate somehow. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me, honestly. Made me realize I'd been living someone else's idea of my life." His hands guided mine as we shaped the clay, our movements becoming more fluid, more synchronized. "What about you? Anyone special?" "Not anymore," I admitted. "Ended things with someone about 6 months ago." He couldn't understand why I needed more. More what? I paused, considering how much to reveal. More everything. More passion, more connection, more life. He was content with safe and predictable. I wasn't. The clay was taking shape between our hands now, something graceful and flowing that neither of us could have created alone. I could feel the warmth of his chest against my back, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his presence seemed to anchor me in a way I hadn't experienced before. "You're not the type for safe and predictable," he observed, and there was something in his tone that made my breath catch. "What type am I then?" I asked, surprised by my own boldness. His hands stilled on mine for a moment, and I felt the full weight of his attention. "The type who knows what she wants," he said quietly, "even when it scares her." The words hung between us, loaded with meaning that went far beyond pottery. I turned in my chair to face him fully, our hands still connected on the clay, and found his eyes waiting for mine. The workshop around us seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in this bubble of heat and possibility. "Kai," I said, his name feeling different on my tongue now, more intimate. "I know," he said, reading something in my expression. "I feel it too." He leaned closer, and I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the slight stubble along his jaw that I wanted to trace with my fingertips. The air between us crackled with tension, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for him to close the distance. When his lips touched mine, it was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was giving me space to pull away. But I didn't want space. I wanted this, wanted him, with an intensity that surprised me. I leaned into the kiss, my hands sliding up to frame his face, clay and all. He responded with a soft sound that sent heat shooting through me, his arms coming around me to pull me closer. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, and I lost myself in the taste of him, the feel of his mouth moving against mine with a hunger that matched my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "We should probably clean up," he said, though his voice suggested that was the last thing he wanted to do. I looked around the workshop, taking in the evidence of our evening together, the half-formed pottery, the clay-covered tools, the lingering warmth in the air. "We should," I agreed, though I made no move to step away from him. "Freya," he said, my name a question and a promise all at once. "Yes? Would you like to come back to my place? I have a private studio there. I could show you some other techniques." The invitation was clearly about more than pottery, and we both knew it. I thought about all the reasons I should say no, should maintain professional boundaries, should protect myself from getting involved with someone I barely knew. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine warmth there alongside the desire, I found I didn't care about any of those reasons. "I'd like that," I said. His smile was brilliant, transforming his already handsome face into something that made my knees weak. "Let me help you clean up then." We worked together to tidy the workspace, washing tools and storing our pieces for next week's class. The mundane tasks were charged with anticipation, every accidental brush of our hands, every shared smile, building the tension between us higher. The drive to his place was short, but felt eternal. He'd offered to let me follow him in my car, ever the gentleman, but I found myself stealing glances at his hands on the steering wheel, remembering how they'd felt guiding mine, imagining how they might feel touching other parts of me. His house was a surprise, a small craftsman bungalow with warm wood details and large windows that would let in beautiful natural light during the day. But it was the converted garage studio that took my breath away. Pottery wheels lined one wall, shelves of finished pieces filled another, and a large work table dominated the center of the space. This wasn't just a hobby for him. It was a passion, a calling. "This is incredible," I breathed, moving to examine some of the pieces on display. They were beautiful, organic forms that seemed to capture movement and emotion in clay. "Thank you," he said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "It's taken me years to get it set up the way I want it." I turned to find him watching me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. The pretense of pottery lessons seemed thin, now standing here in his intimate creative space, but neither of us was ready to acknowledge what we both wanted. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "what did you want to show me?" He moved to the work table and began preparing clay, his movements efficient and practiced. "Hand-building techniques," he said. "Sometimes the wheel isn't the right tool for what you want to create." I joined him at the table, watching as he demonstrated how to roll out flat sheets of clay, how to score and slip pieces together, how to coil long snakes of clay into organic forms. His hands moved with such confidence, such surety that I found myself mesmerized. "Your turn," he said, positioning a lump of clay in front of me. I began to work, trying to replicate his movements, but my own nervous energy made everything feel clumsy and uncertain. When I fumbled a particularly simple join, I let out a frustrated sigh. "Hey," he said gently, moving to stand behind me again. "It's not about perfection. It's about feeling your way through it." His hands covered mine once more, and this time the contact felt even more electric. "Feel how the clay wants to move," he said, his voice low and hypnotic. "Don't force it, let it guide you." As we worked together, our bodies seemed to find their own rhythm. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell the scent of clay, and something uniquely him that made me want to lean back into his embrace. When he praised my progress, his voice warm with approval, I felt a flush of pleasure that had nothing to do with pottery. "You're really good at this," he murmured, his breath stirring the hair at my temple. "I have a good teacher," I replied, and heard the breathiness in my own voice. His hands stilled on mine, and for a moment we just stood there, the air between us thick with unspoken desire. I could feel the rise and fall of his chest against my back, could sense the tension in his body that matched my own. "Freya," he said, and this time my name sounded like a prayer. I turned in his arms, clay-covered hands and all, and looked up, into his face. The control he'd been maintaining was slipping, and I could see the want there, the need that mirrored my own. "Yes," I said, before he could even ask the question. This time when he kissed me, there was nothing tentative about it. His mouth claimed mine with a passion that made my knees buckle, and I pressed against him eagerly, wanting to be closer, needing more. His hands tangled in my hair, clay transferring to the strands, but I didn't care. All I cared about was the feel of him, the taste of him, the way he made me feel more alive than I had in months. We stumbled backward until my hips hit the edge of the work table and he lifted me easily, settling me on the surface. I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him closer, reveling in the solid warmth of him between my thighs. God, Freya, he breathed against my neck, his lips finding the sensitive spot just below my ear. I've been wanting this since the first night. Why didn't you say something? I gasped, my head falling back as he trailed kisses down my throat. Because I didn't want to be that guy, he said, pulling back to look at me. The one who hits on women in class. But being around you, it's been torture. The honesty in his admission, the vulnerability, made my heart race even faster. I cupped his face in my hands, clay and all, and kissed him deeply, pouring all my own pent-up longing into the contact. His hands found the hem of my shirt, fingers tracing along the skin of my waist, and I shivered at the touch. Everything about this felt right. The way our bodies fit together, the way he touched me like I was something precious, the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Are you sure about this? He asked, his forehead resting against mine. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time, I replied, and meant it. He smiled, that brilliant expression that transformed his whole face, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just physical attraction, wasn't just the thrill of something new and exciting. This was the beginning of something deeper, something that scared and exhilarated me in equal measure. When he lifted me from the table and led me toward the door that connected to the main house, I followed without hesitation. We left a trail of clay-covered clothing through his hallway, pausing to kiss against walls, to explore newly revealed skin with eager hands and mouths. His bedroom was simple but warm, with the same attention to beautiful details I'd noticed in the rest of the house, but I barely had time to take it in before we were falling onto his bed together. A tangle of limbs and breathless laughter and desperate kisses. He took his time with me, mapping every inch of my body with his hands and lips, learning what made me gasp. What made me arch against him? What made me call his name like a prayer? When I tried to rush, tried to pull him closer, he gentled my urgency with soft words and softer touches. Let me, he whispered against my skin. Let me take care of you. And I did. I let him worship my body with a reverence that brought tears. To my eyes, let him show me pleasure I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. When he finally joined with me, it was with a tenderness that spoke of deep feeling, of connection that went beyond the physical. We moved together in a rhythm as natural as breathing, building toward something beautiful and overwhelming. When release finally claimed us both, it was with the intensity that left us both shaking, clinging to each other like anchors in a storm. Afterward, we lay entwined in his bed, skin damp with exertion, hearts gradually slowing to normal rhythms. He traced lazy patterns on my shoulder with his fingertip, and I marveled at how right this felt, how perfectly I seemed to fit against his side. That was, I began, then trailed off, unable to find words adequate to describe what we'd just shared. Yeah, he agreed, understanding perfectly. It was. I must have dozed because the next thing I knew, sunlight was filtering through his curtains, and he was gone from beside me. For a moment, panic fluttered in my chest. Had he regretted what happened? Was he trying to escape without an awkward morning-after conversation? But then I heard sounds from the kitchen, smelled coffee, brewing, and relaxed. I found one of his shirts and pulled it on, padding barefoot toward the sounds of breakfast being prepared. I found him at the stove, wearing just pajama pants, his hair still mussed from sleep. When he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that chased away any lingering doubts I might have had. Good morning, he said, moving to wrap his arms around me. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, I admitted, leaning into his embrace. Something about the company. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. I was hoping you'd say that. I made coffee, and I was thinking about making pancakes if you're interested in staying for breakfast. The casual domesticity of the offer made something warm unfurl in my chest. I'd love that, I said. As we cooked together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease, I found myself thinking about how natural this felt. Not just the physical intimacy we'd shared, but this, the quiet morning conversations, the way he handed me a mug of coffee doctored exactly how I liked it without having to ask, the way he made space for me in his routine like I belonged there. What are you thinking about? He asked, noticing my contemplative mood. Just this, I said, gesturing between us. How easy it feels. I was expecting things to be awkward this morning. Are you disappointed that they're not? He teased, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. Not at all, I said quickly. Just surprised. Good surprised. He plated the pancakes and handed me one, then leaned against the counter to study my face. Can I ask you something? Anything. What happens now? I mean, we still have 5 more weeks of class together, and He paused, seeming to search for the right words. I don't want this to be just one night for us. My heart skipped at his admission. I don't want that either, I said honestly. But I don't really know how to do this. The last time I jumped into something this intense, it ended badly. We don't have to jump, he said gently. We can take it slow, see where things go naturally. Even though I gestured vaguely toward his bedroom, and he laughed. Even though, he confirmed, physical connection doesn't mean we have to rush the emotional stuff. We can build this at our own pace. The maturity of his approach, the way he made space for my fears without dismissing them, made me fall for him a little more. I'd like that, I said. Good, he said, moving closer to brush a soft kiss across my lips, because I have a feeling this could be something really special. As I drove home later that morning, still wearing his shirt under my jacket, I found myself smiling despite the uncertainty ahead. Kai was right. This did feel like something special, something worth exploring carefully, worth nurturing into, whatever it might become. When Wednesday rolled around and it was time for class again, I felt nervous butterflies as I walked into the workshop. Would things be weird between us? Would the other students notice something different? But when I walked in and saw Kai's face light up at the sight of me, all my worries melted away. He was the same warm, encouraging partner he'd always been, just with an added layer of intimacy in his smiles, in the way his hand lingered when he helped adjust my technique. How's your piece coming along? He asked as we settled at our wheels. Better than expected, I said, and wasn't just talking about pottery. He caught the double meaning and grinned. I'm glad to hear it. Maybe we can work on some more advanced techniques after class? I'd like that very much, I replied, my cheeks warming at the memory of exactly what those techniques might involve. As the weeks passed, we fell into a rhythm, class on Wednesdays, long evenings at his studio learning, and exploring both pottery and each other, lazy weekend mornings in his kitchen making breakfast and planning our days. He introduced me to new forms and methods with patience and enthusiasm, and I found myself not just learning to work with clay, but learning to trust, to open myself to something beautiful and uncertain. One evening, as we worked side by side, on matching bowls, I realized something had shifted fundamentally in how I saw my life. The structured, careful existence I'd built felt small now, inadequate for the woman I was becoming under Kai's gentle encouragement. I've been thinking about quitting my job, I said suddenly, surprising myself with the admission. His hand stilled, on his clay. Really? Why? I want to do something that matters, something real, like this. I gestured to the pieces surrounding us. I want to create things that bring beauty into the world. He was quiet for a moment, considering. What would you do instead? I don't know yet. Maybe try to make a living with pottery. Maybe teach art to kids. Maybe something I haven't even thought of yet. I looked at him, suddenly needing his approval, more than I wanted to admit. Does that sound crazy? It sounds brave, he said simply. It sounds like someone who's figured out what she really wants. I'm terrified, I confessed. Good, he said, reaching over to squeeze my clay-covered hand. The best things in life are usually terrifying. 3 months later, I handed in my notice at the gallery. 6 months after that, I had my first solo show featuring pieces I'd created in Kai's studio, with his encouragement and guidance. A year after that first night in the ceramics workshop, he proposed with a ring he'd made himself, the metal band, cradling a stone the color of clay. Standing in his arms, covered in pottery dust and paint, and the evidence of a life lived fully, I thought about how sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places. How sometimes you have to be willing to get your hands dirty, to be molded and shaped by experience, to create something entirely new. Some nights, when we're working late in the studio, our hands moving together over clay that yields to our touch, I remember that first evening when everything changed. The way he looked at me, the way the clay felt between our fingers, the way something deep inside me recognized home in his presence. What about you? Have you ever had a moment when everything shifted, when someone came into your life and helped you reshape who you thought you were? Tell me about it in the comments. I love hearing about those transformative connections. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of unexpected passion and life-changing encounters. Until next time, remember that the most beautiful art comes from being willing to get a little messy.